Hello everyone. So now let's move on to the complications of diabetes mellitus. So the outline for this session is as follows: pathogenesis of complications of diabetes mellitus, morphology of the complications, then we'll see the differences between type 1 and type 2 diabetes mellitus, followed by investigations and few lines about the treatment of diabetes mellitus. To begin with, the complications of diabetes mellitus. Diabetes causes serious pathological effects on virtually all the systems of the body. The most significant complications occur in blood vessels, kidney, eyes, and peripheral nerves. The pathogenesis of the long-term complications is multifactorial, but persistent hyperglycemia or glucotoxicity is the key mediator for all these complications. The important determinants are genetic factors, duration of the disease, and the level of blood sugar control. Complications of diabetes mellitus can be divided as acute complications and late complications. Acute complications are hypoglycemia, diabetic ketoacidosis, hyperosmolar non-ketotic coma. So of these, diabetic ketoacidosis and hyperosmolar non-ketotic coma has already been covered when we were dealing with the clinical features. So we'll not be touching upon this in this session. And the late complications of diabetes can be divided as macrovascular disease and microvascular disease. So macrovascular disease, it involves the large and the medium-sized muscular arteries. So of this, atherosclerosis, which leads to ischemic heart disease, stroke, and peripheral vascular disease is seen. So apart from this, we can also see hyaline arteriosclerosis and diabetic microangiopathy as the complication. Coming to the microvascular disease, it usually affects the capillaries in the target organs, and it leads to diabetic retinopathy in the eyes, diabetic nephropathy in the kidneys, and diabetic neuropathy in the nerves. Coming to the pathogenesis of complications. The pathogenesis of whatever complications diabetes mellitus causes can be divided and explained in three pathways. So first is formation of advanced glycation end products, that is AGE. Then we have activation of protein kinase C, and third pathway is intracellular hyperglycemia with disturbance in polyol pathways. So first is the formation of advanced glycation end product, that is AGE. So what is this AGE? The AGE are formed as a result of non-enzymatic reactions between the intracellular glucose-derived precursors with the amino groups of both intracellular and extracellular proteins. So the natural rate of this advanced glycation end products is greatly accelerated when there is presence of hyperglycemia. So this advanced glycation end products, once it is formed, it binds to the receptor which is present on the inflammatory cells like macrophages and T cells, and it can also bind to the vascular endothelium and the vascular smooth muscle. So upon binding, it causes a number of effects. The detrimental effects of the advanced glycation end product after it binds to the specific receptors are: so first is it causes the release of cytokines and growth factors from the macrophages and mesangial cells. So some of the examples are insulin-like growth factor and platelet-derived growth factor. So second, it increases the permeability of the endothelial cells lining the vessels, and it also leads to the generation of reactive oxygen species in these endothelial cells. So third action, it leads to the increased activity of the procoagulants on endothelial cells and macrophages. So fourth, it increases the proliferation and synthesis of extracellular matrix by the fibroblasts and smooth muscle cells. Advanced glycation end products also has few effects on the extracellular matrix. The advanced glycation end products, it directly cross-links the extracellular matrix proteins. So this cross-linked proteins, it is resistant to proteolytic digestion. So because of this, there is reduced protein removal and increased deposition of these proteins. So this advanced glycation end product cross-linked proteins, it can trap the other plasma and interstitial proteins. So for example, in the large vessels, it leads to the trapping of low density lipoproteins. So this LDL, it gets trapped within the AGE modified large vessels. This will accelerate atherosclerosis. In the capillaries, example in the renal glomeruli, albumin can get trapped within the capillaries, leading to the basement membrane thickening. So this is the main pathogenesis in diabetic microangiopathy. AGE, it also causes cross-linking between the collagen type 1 molecules in large vessels. So this will decrease the elasticity and predisposes to shear stress and endothelial injury in these large vessels. So apart from that, it also causes cross-linking between collagen type 4 molecules in the basement membrane. So this will decrease the endothelial cell adhesion and increases the fluid filtration. So these are the different detrimental effects which the advanced glycation end products causes. So this is a pathway which explains most of the pathogenic events which take part as a complication in diabetes mellitus. So second pathway, we have activation of protein kinase C. So the intracellular hyperglycemia in diabetic patients can stimulate the de novo synthesis of diacylglycerol, which is called DAG, from the glycolytic intermediates, and hence it will cause the activation of protein kinase C. And we know that the activation of this protein kinase C by this DAG, that is diacylglycerol, it leads to important signal transduction pathway which leads to many detrimental effects. So this activation of protein kinase C is the second pathway. So what are the different effects of this protein kinase C activation? There will be production of pro-angiogenic molecules. Example is the vascular endothelial growth factor, which leads to neovascularization, which we see in diabetic retinopathy. So second, it causes the production of pro-fibrogenic molecules like transforming growth factor beta, which leads to the increased deposition of extracellular matrix and the basement membrane material in the vessels. Third, it causes the production of procoagulant molecules. Example is plasminogen activator inhibitor 1, which increases the vascular occlusive episodes. It also causes the production of pro-inflammatory cytokines in the vascular endothelium. So third pathway, we have disturbances in the polyol. So some tissues, example we have nerves, lens, kidney, blood vessels, they do not require insulin for glucose transport. So in these tissues, whenever there is increase in the intracellular glucose, it gets metabolized by the enzyme aldose reductase to sorbitol. So this sorbitol is a polyol. So this sorbitol, it gets reduced to fructose in a reaction that uses NADPH as a cofactor. So this NADPH is also required by the enzyme glutathione reductase in the reaction that will lead to the generation of reduced glutathione. So this reduced glutathione is one of the important antioxidant mechanism in the cell. So what happens here is, because of the increased intracellular glucose level, so to reduce this glucose to fructose, NADPH is used up more. So this NADPH will not be available for the formation of this reduced glutathione, which is an important antioxidant mechanism. So because of the reduction of this reduced glutathione, there is increase in the cellular susceptibility to oxidative stress. So in neurons, there is this persistent hyperglycemia. It appears to be the major underlying cause for diabetic neuropathy. That is, it's called glucose neurotoxicity. So this is about the third pathway, that is disturbance in the polyol pathway. So after knowing the pathogenetic mechanisms involved in the complication of diabetes mellitus, so now let's move on to the morphology of diabetes and its related complications. So let's see which organs are involved and what are the microscopic features in these complications. So let's see the changes occurring in the pancreas. The different microscopic changes which occurs in pancreas in diabetes mellitus are: so first is there is reduction in the number and size of the islets of Langerhans. This change most often is seen in type 1 diabetes. Most of the islets are small, inconspicuous, and they are not easily detected. So the second microscopic change is insulitis. Insulitis is the leukocytic infiltration of the islets of Langerhans, which is composed mainly of lymphocytes and macrophages. Both type 1 and type 2 diabetes may demonstrate this islet cell inflammation in the early stage of disease, but it is more severe in type 1 diabetes mellitus. Third is amyloid replacement of the islets. There will be deposition of pink amorphous material beginning in and around the capillaries and in between the islet cells. It is not seen in the early stages. It occurs only at advanced stages where the islets may be virtually obliterated by this amyloid replacement. Fibrosis may also be observed in this stage. So this is the microscopic picture which shows the acinar cells, and in the center you can see this is the islets of Langerhans, which are infiltrated by mononuclear inflammatory cells. That is, it is showing insulitis. So this is another picture which is seen in the late stages of diabetes mellitus. You can see the acinar cells, and in the center the islets is completely replaced by pink amorphous material, that is, there is amyloid deposition. So this change occurs only in the later stages of diabetes mellitus. So next, moving on to the microvascular complications. Metabolic injury occurs to the large and the medium sized vessels, which is termed the macrovascular disease. There will be accelerated atherosclerosis, which affects aorta and the large and medium sized arteries. The atherosclerosis which occurs here is similar to that seen in non-diabetic patients, but here it will be of greater severity and it occurs at an earlier age compared to the non-diabetic patients. It is often associated with complicated plaques such as ulceration, calcification, and thrombosis. The possible ill effects of this accelerated atherosclerosis in diabetes are as follows. In heart, it causes coronary artery disease, so manifestation in the form of acute coronary syndrome, that is myocardial infarction, or it can also lead to congestive heart failure. In the brain, it leads to cerebrovascular disease or stroke. In the extremities, it causes peripheral vascular disease. The patients can have ulcerations, gangrene, which may require amputation. Myocardial infarction, that is caused by atherosclerosis of the coronary arteries, it is the most common cause of death in diabetic patients. Significantly, it is almost as common in diabetic women as in diabetic men. So next, moving on to hyaline arteriosclerosis. It is most prevalent and more severe in diabetics than in non-diabetics. There will be amorphous hyaline thickening of the wall of the arterioles, which causes narrowing of the lumen. In diabetic patients, the severity is related to the duration of the disease and also the presence or absence of hypertension. Kidney is most frequently and severely involved by this hyaline arteriosclerosis. This is the microscopic image showing hyaline arteriosclerosis. So you can see the vessel wall which is thickened and the lumen is narrowed. Next, moving on to diabetic microangiopathy. Microangiopathy is the term used for diffuse thickening of the basement membranes. The thickening is most evident in the capillaries of the skin. It can also occur in the skeletal muscle, retina, renal glomeruli, renal medulla. And apart from those vascular structures, it can also involve the non-vascular structures like the renal tubules, Bowman's capsule, peripheral nerves, and placenta. Microscopy of diabetic microangiopathy. The basement membrane, which separates the parenchyma or the endothelial cells from the surrounding tissue, is markedly thickened by concentric layers of hyaline material, which is composed predominantly of type 4 collagen. So despite the increase in the thickness of the basement membrane, these capillaries are more leaky when it's compared to the normal vessels. This is the microscopic picture of the kidney, which shows the renal tubules. Here you can see the renal tubular basement membrane, which is markedly thickened, which is highlighted by Paz stain. So the diabetic microangiopathy, it leads to the development of diabetic nephropathy, diabetic retinopathy and some forms of diabetic neuropathy. Next we have diabetic nephropathy. The kidneys are the prime targets of diabetes mellitus. So after myocardial infarction, we have chronic renal failure, which is the second most common cause of death in this diabetic patients. Grossly, the kidneys in diabetic patients will be usually smaller in size compared to normal kidneys, and external surface will be granular, and the kidneys are decreased in function and they have high urine output. So coming to the morphology of diabetic nephropathy, there are four types of lesions which are encountered. So first, diabetes, it can affect the glomerulus, leading to glomerular lesions. It can also affect the vessels. We have renal vascular lesions. It can lead to pyelonephritis and it can also affect the tubules. So accordingly, the glomerular lesions are capillary basement membrane thickening. Second, we have diffuse mesangial sclerosis, or it can lead to nodular glomerulosclerosis. And the renal vascular lesions, it can lead to hyaline arteriosclerosis, or they can be renal atheromas. Pyelonephritis, it can be acute or chronic pyelonephritis, and a special variety called acute necrotizing papillitis can be seen. Tubular lesions are also common in this diabetic patients. The glomerular lesions are, so first we have capillary basement membrane thickening. The glomerular capillary basement membranes are thickened along their entire length. This change, it can be detected by electron microscopy even before few years of the onset of diabetes, even when there is no change in the renal function. So this is the microscopic image. So you can see this is the glomerulus. Here there are glomerular capillaries which are indicated by the arrow. So there is thickening of the basement membrane of this glomerular capillaries. So this is one of the initial changes in diabetes. Diffuse mesangial sclerosis. In this, there is diffuse increase in the mesangial matrix along with increase in the mesangial cells. It's always associated with basement membrane thickening. It is seen in patients with more than 10-year duration of diabetes mellitus. Patient usually comes with the manifestation of nephrotic syndrome, that is proteinuria, hypoalbuminemia and edema. So this is a microscopic image of the kidney. So here we can see the glomerulus and the arrow is pointing to the diffuse glomerulosclerotic area in which there is increase in the mesangial matrix along with the proliferation of the mesangial cells. You can also see the surrounding tubules. There is increase in the thickening of the basement membrane. Nodular glomerulosclerosis, it is also called as Kimmel-Chill-Wilson lesion after the two persons who named it. It's a ball-like deposits of laminated matrix which is situated at the periphery of the glomerulus. It is pathognomonic of diabetes. So these nodular glomerulosclerotic lesions are Paz positive and they usually contain trapped mesangial cells, lipid and fibrin. It is seen in approximately 15% to 30% of persons with long-term diabetes, and it is a major contributor to morbidity and mortality. This is the microscopic image showing the glomerulus. The two arrows are pointing to the nodular lesion situated at the periphery of the glomerulus. So this is the nodule containing the laminated matrix which is pathognomonic of diabetic nephropathy, nodular glomerulosclerotic lesions. As the disease progresses, the nodules may enlarge. They compress and engulf the capillaries, obliterating the glomerular tufts. So there are two microscopic features seen here. there will be fibrin caps and capsular drops. So fibrin cap, here there will be accumulation of hyaline material in the capillary loops. The same hyaline material, if it is adherent to the Bowman's capsule, it is called capsular drops. So this fibrin cap and capsular drop are seen in diabetic kidney. Ultimately, there is ischemia, tubular atrophy and interstitial fibrosis, which leads to contraction in the size of the kidney. Both the diffuse and nodular forms of glomerulosclerosis will lead to ischemia, so there will be scarring of the kidney. So finally, there will be granular cortical surface which will be surrounded by dilated capillary loops. This is the microscopic image showing the glomerulus. Here you can see there is presence of fibrin cap pointed by the arrow. So this is the hyaline accumulation which occurs in the capillary loop. This is another microscopic picture showing the glomerulus. Here the arrow is pointing towards the capsular drop. So the hyaline accumulation takes place in the Bowman's capsule. So after the glomerular lesions, let's move on to the renal vascular lesions. The renal atherosclerosis and hyaline arteriosclerosis are the two important renal vascular lesions seen in diabetic patients. So kidney is one of the most frequently and severely affected organs. Hyaline arteriosclerosis, it affects both afferent and efferent arterioles. So if there is hyaline arteriosclerosis affecting the efferent arterioles, it is mainly due to diabetes, and it is very rarely seen in non-diabetic patients. Next lesion in kidney which can be seen as pyelonephritis. It can be both acute pyelonephritis or chronic pyelonephritis. Pyelonephritis, it is an inflammation of the kidney that usually begins in the interstitial tissue and then spreads to involve the tubules. So diabetics have more severe involvement. In acute pyelonephritis, there will be patchy interstitial suppurative inflammation, and we can also find tubular necrosis. In chronic pyelonephritis, there will be chronic tubulointerstitial inflammation, and there will be renal scarring with involvement of the calyces and pelvis. So here we can see the gross and the microscopic image of acute pyelonephritis. So in the gross image, we can see the kidneys showing grayish white areas of inflammation and abscess formation. In the second picture, it is the microscopic image showing acute neutrophilic exudate within the tubules and the surrounding renal substance in acute pyelonephritis. Acute necrotizing papillitis, also called as acute papillary necrosis, it is a special pattern of acute pyelonephritis that is much more prevalent in diabetics than in non-diabetics. So coming to the gross feature, here the tips or the distal two-thirds of the pyramids have a grey-white to yellow areas of necrosis. So microscopy will show coagulative infarct necrosis with preservation of outlines of the tubules. There will be leukocytic response which is limited to the junctions between the preserved and the destroyed tissue. This is the gross image of acute papillary necrosis. So here we can see the tip of the renal pyramids showing areas of necrosis which is grey yellow in color. So this is the microscopic image. Here we can see the renal parenchyma which is preserved at the periphery, and in the center we can see the area showing necrotic medullary papillae. So this is a feature of acute papillary necrosis. So next, coming to chronic pyelonephritis. So this is the gross image of the kidney, the external surface showing diffuse granular surface. This is another picture showing the cut surface of kidney, where we can see the cortex which is markedly thinned out with areas of irregular depression, which is a feature of chronic pyelonephritis. This is the microscopic image of the kidney taken from chronic pyelonephritis case. So here we can see prominent scarring and mononuclear cell infiltrate in the renal cortex adjacent to relatively well preserved renal parenchyma. So this is another microscopic image from chronic pyelonephritis case. So here there is presence of thyroidization of the tubules in an advanced case of chronic pyelonephritis. So you can see this is the PAS stained microscopic image. Next, coming to diabetic ocular complications. So the different complications which can occur in the diabetic eye are visual impairment, sometimes even total blindness can be seen, cataract, glaucoma, retinopathy. So retinopathy is the most common complication. There are two types of retinopathy, non-proliferative retinopathy and proliferative retinopathy. Non-proliferative retinopathy. This term, it is referred to the spectrum of changes located within the retina which can occur due to structural and functional abnormalities of angiogenesis. So the different changes which can occur are intraretinal or preretinal hemorrhages, retinal exudates, microaneurysms, venous dilations, edema and thickening of the retinal capillaries. Retinal exudates, it can be a hard exudate or a soft exudate. Soft exudate in cases of microinfarcts and hard exudate when there is deposits of plasma proteins and lipids. Microaneurysms, discrete saccular dilations of retinal choroidal capillaries seen as small red dots. Retinal edema, macular edema due to excessive capillary permeability, microocclusions are also seen. So all these changes occur due to microangiopathy. It leads to loss of capillary pericytes and hence focal weakening of capillary structure. This is the fluorescein angiogram of retina showing capillary microaneurysm. Proliferative retinopathy. This is a process of neovascularization and fibrosis. There will be a web of newly formed vessels called neovascular membrane, angiogenic vessels with or without supportive fibrous or glial stroma. It can be neovascularization of disc where the surface of optic nerve is involved, neovascularization elsewhere on the surface of retina. Retinal neovascularization, in this there will be newly formed vessels which breach the internal limiting membrane of retina. So this is the picture showing the features of both non-proliferative and proliferative retinopathy. In non-proliferative retinopathy, there will be areas of hemorrhages and cotton wool spots, whereas in proliferative retinopathy, the main feature is neovascularization and fibrosis. Coming to the complications of diabetic retinopathy, there can be separation of vitreous humor from internal limiting membrane of the retina, which leads to posterior vitreous detachment, or there can be massive hemorrhage, or there can be organization of the hemorrhage. So because of the organization of this hemorrhage, it can lead to tractional retinal detachment, or it can disrupt the orientation of photoreceptors leading to visual distortion. Retinal neovascularization, it occurs due to increase in the vascular endothelial growth factor, which leads to neovascular membrane present on the iris, because of which there will be contraction and adhesion between the iris and the trabecular meshwork, leading to the anterior synechiae formation, which will occlude the aqueous outflow, leading to neovascular glaucoma, which is an important complication. The next complication which can be seen in diabetic patients is diabetic neuropathy. So diabetes, it affects the central and the peripheral nervous system. So the patterns of neuropathy with which the patients can present with are peripheral neuropathy, autonomic neuropathy, or diabetic mononeuropathy. Peripheral neuropathy, it can be of different types: distal symmetric sensory or sensory motor neuropathy, or it can be focal or multifocal asymmetric neuropathy. The patient can present with paresthesia, tingling, and numbness in the distal limbs. There will be decreased sensation, delayed wound healing, and peripheral vascular disease, which will contribute to diabetic foot, and the patient may require amputations because of it. Second, there can be autonomic neuropathy, which leads to disturbances in the bladder and the bowel function, resting tachycardia, orthostatic hypotension, and sometimes sexual impotence and decreased sweating. Diabetic mononeuropathy. Here the patient will manifest with sudden foot drop, wrist drop, or there will be isolated cranial nerve palsies. The pathogenesis of diabetic neuropathy occurs due to microangiopathy, which was earlier explained, and due to increased capillary permeability. Also, there will be direct axonal damage, which occur due to alteration in sorbitol metabolism. There will be decrease in myoinositol, a cell membrane component of nerves, which is required for normal functioning. So, microscopic features, there will be axonal damage, segmental demyelination, loss of nerve fibers, endoneurial arterioles. There will be thickening, hyalinization, pass positivity in the walls, and also reduplication of the basement membrane. So those are the important complications of diabetes which was discussed, and this image shows the diabetes complications from head to toe. So here you can see microangiopathy, which leads to cerebral vascular infarcts and hemorrhage in the brain. In the eyes, retinopathy, cataract and glaucoma. Myocardial infarct in the heart. In the vessels, atherosclerosis is common. In the pancreas, there will be insulitis, amyloid deposition and islet cell loss. Nephrosclerosis in the kidney, which can be glomerulosclerosis, arteriosclerosis, pyelonephritis. And in the upper limb, there can be peripheral neuropathy. There can be autonomic neuropathy leading to bladder and the bowel dysfunction. And in the lower limbs, again there can be peripheral vascular atherosclerosis, which leads to gangrene and infections, because of which the patient may require amputations. And here we have to remember, gangrene which leads to amputations are 100 times more common in diabetics than in non-diabetic patients. Now let's see some of the important features to differentiate between type 1 diabetes mellitus and type 2 diabetes mellitus. The genetic locus in type 1 diabetes mellitus is on chromosome 6. It has 30 to 70% concordance in twins, HLA delinked, and in type 2 diabetes there is 50 to 90% concordance and there is no HLA association. The main pathogenetic mechanism in type 1 diabetes mellitus is autoimmunity. There will be islet cell antibodies and there will be severe insulin deficiency. In type 2 diabetes, there will be insulin resistance and there will be relative insulin deficiency due to beta cell dysfunction. Coming to islet cells, in type 1 diabetes mellitus, there will be insulitis, which occurs early in the course of the diabetes mellitus. There will be marked atrophy and fibrosis of the islet cells, and there will be beta cell depletion. Whereas in type 2 diabetes, there will be no insulitis, there will be just focal atrophy, and there will be amyloid deposition and mild beta cell depletion. Coming to the age of onset, in type 1 it is usually below 30 years, whereas it occurs after 30 years in type 2 diabetes. Body habitus, it's normal to wasted in type 1, whereas the people are obese in type 2 diabetes. Plasma insulin level, it is low to absent in type 1, whereas it is normal to high in type 2. Plasma glucagon is high and suppressible in type 1 diabetes, whereas it is high and resistant in type 2 diabetes. Acute complication is ketoacidosis in type 1, whereas hyperosmolar coma is common in type 2 diabetes. And insulin therapy is responsive in type 1, whereas usually if there is receptor dysfunction, the people will be resistant to insulin therapy in type 2 diabetes. And response to sulfonylurea treatment, it is unresponsive in type 1, whereas the patients will respond to the treatment in type 2 diabetes mellitus. So next, moving on to the important investigations to be done in diabetic patients are routine hematological investigations like complete hemogram, and second we have biochemical investigations like blood sugar estimation. It can be done either in random, fasting or postprandial states. Glucose tolerance test, glycosylated hemoglobin, that is HbA1c, fructosamine levels, C-peptide levels, proinsulin levels, insulin assay, renal function tests with serum electrolytes, liver function tests, and lipid profile are usually done. Diabetic patients will also require examination of urine, both physical, chemical examination with microscopy, culture, and sensitivity. Other investigations which has to be done in diabetic patients are fundoscopy to examine the eye, ECG and echo to investigate the heart, ultrasound, X-ray, CT, MRI, and Doppler if required. So before winding up the session, let's see a few lines about the treatment of diabetes mellitus. So step 1 is lifestyle changes. This is a very important step in control of diabetes mellitus. Weight loss, increased physical activity, and improved diet is usually required. So step 2, oral hypoglycemic agents, especially type 2 diabetes patients will require. Metformin is usually recommended. Step 3, additional medications. So next step in treating type 2 diabetes mellitus is more individualized, that is the additional medications which required will differ from patient to patient. So the other additional medications can be added for the treatment. And step 4, insulin therapy, especially type 1 diabetes. A combination of oral hypoglycemic and insulin is needed by most patients along with lifestyle changes. This picture shows the primary sites of action of oral anti-diabetic agents. Alpha glucosidase inhibitors will decrease the carbohydrate breakdown or absorption. Sulfonylureas or meglitinides, it will increase the insulin secretion. Bigonides, it will decrease glucose output and decrease the insulin resistance. Thiazolidinediones will decrease the insulin resistance. And I'm sure you'll be reading about it in detail in your pharmacology class. Thank you all.